Hello everyone. I've talked a lot on this channel about individual people, families, and about the lives that they lived, when, where, and why they did the things that they did. And this time around, I want to talk about something that's a little bit different and change things up, which is to talk about the mindset of being a genealogist and what you can do to become a better one. So in this episode, I'm going to be counting down my top 5 things that you can do to become a better family researcher. So without further ado, let's begin number 1, and that is to always question everything. In the day and age where you can find pretty much anything on the internet, and you can find public trees, you can find articles and things like that, it's really easy to take things at face value, and you just find a tree and you add the information, you find an article, you add the information. But in genealogy, it's really important to always try to get to the source of everything that you do. So there have been instances where I've found something on a famous person, because I do a lot of videos on famous people on my channel, where Wikipedia will have some info about them, about their family, about their lives. And then I do a little bit more digging, and it turns out that what's written in Wikipedia or what's written in an article actually is not true. Sometimes there's a kernel of truth, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everything in that is true. The same went for when I did my episode on Judge Judy. There's actually a fairly famous book that talks about individuals who descend from rabbinic lines. And it put Judge Judy in there as being descended from this rabbinic line. But after doing some research into her family, it turns out that was not the case. And this book was just mistaken. It was an honest mistake, but it was still a mistake. And so it's really important in genealogy, question everything. Don't take it at face value. All right, so let's go on to number 2. But before we begin, I just have something to remind you of, which is that you should do a flying jump kick into the brick wall, which is the like button, and just completely knock it over. And also be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel and hit the notification bell so you'll be notified anytime I post new episodes. So with that being said, number 2 is always be persistent. Now, what does it mean to be persistent? Everybody hears this term get thrown around. Oh, you just got to keep trying, keep trying. What I'm talking about is the kind of persistence that happens when you think you've hit the end of the road. Like you genuinely think there's nothing else you're going to find, but then you keep on pushing. That is the thing that separates good genealogists from great genealogists, in my opinion, is the ability to withstand what feels like an insurmountable task and just keep on looking at things from a different angle. Now, there's a billion different angles that you can look at. One thing that I've come across in Jewish genealogy is when I research people from the region of Galicia in modern-day Ukraine and Poland, oftentimes there are house numbers associated with people. So I might look at a document, see the names of their family members, and think that I'm not going to find anything more, but then I'll find the house number they live at and look at some other documents of people who live at that house number. And that goes for pretty much anything. You can always find something in a document or in a group of documents that ties them together that maybe you hadn't noticed at first. And so it's really important, even when you think you've hit the end of the line, always attack things from as many different viewpoints as you possibly can. Be persistent, never give up. There are instances where you are actually at the end of the line, but you can't know what those are unless you just keep on pushing on all of them. All right, so number 3 is something that I almost never hear get talked about in relation to genealogy, and this is one that is useful for pretty much every aspect of life, which is to keep your brain in shape. Your best asset for researching anything and critically thinking is your brain. And you really have to treat it well. What this means is things like getting enough sleep, exercising, eating healthy. And something that I find really important too is to keep it active using things like puzzles. Okay, I love to play chess. and I find that chess really helps to stimulate my mind. It's important to find something in addition to genealogy to keep your brain active, because when you finally get back to the computer, back to the records, you're just going to have that mindset of thinking about things from different angles, from using outside the box tactics to break through riddles and puzzles. And that's why it's super, super important to always keep your brain in the best shape possible. All right, number 4, be a learning machine. You can have studied something your entire life. You can have looked at every single book, document, or whatnot that you think you can have looked at, but there's always something else to learn. And that can be a different topic. I find it really, really useful that after exploring stuff about one family or region that I'm researching, if I'm feeling a little bit of a lull, I will go learn something about something else, because knowledge really compounds upon itself. You can accumulate knowledge for decades and decades, and you never know when that little tidbit that you learned one time ends up coming in use for something completely different. And a lot of times these connections only get made when you've compounded and accumulated large amounts of knowledge. So it's really important in genealogy to just keep on learning, keep on reading, never accept the fact that you know everything that there is to know, because you most certainly don't. I know for sure that there are tons of things, even in the topics that I consider myself to be proficient at, that I am humbled on a regular basis by people who know more than I do, and therefore it's important to learn what you don't know and then gain that knowledge, and it's going to really help you out with your genealogy. All right, and last but not least, we have number 5, which is to leave your ego behind. Now, this is a tough one, because the whole purpose of the ego is to convince you that how you perceive yourself and you perceive your actions is right. In genealogy, you're doing something really important, which is preserving history. This is something which I believe has a net positive for society. You are helping to make connections and preserve things so that others might be able to take this data and gain from it. But one thing that's really, really hard to do is to challenge our assumptions, because our ego really doesn't like that. I want to give you an example, which is I had come across this gigantic public family tree on Ancestry, and it had a branch of my family, and it was going back to like the 1500s. No sources attached to it. I was like a little bit suspicious, but I reached out to the owner of the tree and asked him, where are your sources? Where did you get this information? And his response was, I can put whatever I want in my own tree. Don't question what I've put on there. Don't challenge my assumptions. And in my mind, this is the worst thing anybody could ever do as a genealogist, because you should be obsessed with finding the facts. We all build stories and assumptions based on the little details and our knowledge of context of the time. You know, that's completely fine. I think we all speculate a little bit. I definitely speculate, but it's important to call it for what it is, which is that you're speculating. You're making an assumption. It's not a fact. And when people present things as facts that are assumptions, and then when their assumption gets disproven, they refuse to back down, that is counterproductive to being a good genealogist. because you should only be obsessed with the truth. That's it. How you feel about how big your family tree is, or the story that you've internalized about your family's history, not important. The only thing that's important is getting the facts right, and to do that, you really have to get rid of your ego as much as possible. So anyways, those are my 5 tips for becoming a better genealogist and improving your mindset as a family researcher. I really hope this has been useful for you. If you got any enjoyment from it, let me know in the comment section below. Also, be sure to follow me on social media. I've included links to both my Instagram and my Twitter. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.